Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will break down 5 classic stretches that lots of people get wrong and show you how to fix them with small, smart tweaks. Ever felt that you are doing a particular stretch, but it is not helping you and you don't feel any stretching sensation or you don't feel any progress? It might be that your form or technique is not exactly correct. Wrong stretching techniques can lead to injuries, discomfort, and lack of results. So let's fix this together. Stretch number 1 is standing quad stretch. One of the most common mistakes that I see in this stretch that your hips are not on the same line. If you shift your hips and your hips are not on the same line, even if you bring your heel to your glutes, you will not really feel the stretch in your quads. The second mistake I see with this stretch, you're arching your lower back like this. Again, locking in your hips and not really feeling the stretch. Other thing you want to check is your pelvis alignment. It needs to be tucked in. So if we can do a few exercises to feel the pelvis alignment. So if you roll your pelvis in, this is the posterior pelvic tilt. And this is what we are looking for in that stretch. So next time you do the quad stretch, remember these 3 things. Pelvis alignment, where your pelvis is rolled in. Posture, straight posture, making sure your hips are on the same line and not shifted to one or the other side. And make sure that your lower back is not bending or your pelvis is not in the anterior pelvic tilt. I also like to keep my foot here by my toes, not here at the ankle, as an additional stretch for my foot. Stretch number 2 is a calf stretch by the wall. And then mistakes I see is the foot not always positioned forward, and sometimes it is positioned at the angle like this. In this way, you're not really stretching your calves or your ankles. You might be stretching somewhere in your adductors. I really don't know because I don't feel any stretch. Actually, if I push my hips forward, I will feel stretch in the adductors. So it's not really stretching what you intend to do. So it is really important that both of your feet are facing forward. Another thing, again, your pelvis alignment. If you're standing like this and you don't feel the stretch, you want to really push your pelvis a little bit forward until you feel the stretching sensation. When we work with the stretch, we want to see the stretching sensation between 6, 7 out of 10 to really feel the results that we are looking for. If the stretch is not strong enough, it's not gonna do anything for you. And if the stretch is too painful, it might injure you. Another mistake I see in this simple stretch is that your hips are again not pointed forward, but they are pointed sort of sideways. So this really can affect your knee because your knee will be in a really stretched, locked in position where your foot looks forward, but your hips are open to the side. So once again, all the important points, you want your feet to be pointed forward, you want your hips to be pointed forward, you want to make sure that your pelvis is slightly tucked in, and if you want to increase the range of motion to make the stretch deeper, you will bend your knees slightly forward until you reach that stretching sensation that you are looking for, 6, 7 out of 10. And then you want to stay here for 30 seconds. And then remember to stretch your other leg. The third stretch is a hip flexor stretch. And it doesn't matter if you're doing a standing stretch or kneeling stretch. The mistakes are very similar to the previous stretch for our calves and ankles. So it is important that your feet again are pointed forward, your hips are on the same line. The most common mistake with this stretch is pelvis alignment. Again, if your pelvis is tucked out in the anterior pelvic tilt where you have this bend in your lower back, this will not stretch your hip flexor. You might feel it somewhere else, or you might feel absolutely nothing. So it doesn't really matter how far you go with your knee. If your pelvis is not aligned, you're not going to feel the stretch in your hip flexor. So you don't really need to have this big sort of lunging position. When you start the hip flexor stretch, first you can do just a few movements with your pelvis, and then when your pelvis is tucked in, you can bend the knee of your front leg a little bit further, so you take your stretch to the level that you are looking for, and only then you're gonna count 30 seconds. Another mistake I see with the hip flexor stretch for people who then try to take the stretch deeper, they take their arm and they do a side bend. Side bend is not going to stretch your hip flexor and then your psoas and iliacus muscle. A side bend is just going to really collapse the whole figure. You will lose your pelvis alignment and you will really be stretching the side of the body. What you want to do, take your arm slightly to the side without collapsing the side of your body, and you want just to bring your arm up and stretch that arm up like you want to touch something, like you want to grab something from the ceiling, okay? And when you stretch that arm up, you will feel a deeper stretch in your hip flexor, in your psoas muscles and your iliacus muscles, and this is what you're looking for. And for this stretch with your arm, I suggest that you just support yourself with a chair or you hold to the wall, because it is quite an intense stretch. Feel the stretch all across the body, not on the side of the body. You can always take a video of yourself or put a mirror and see your stretch and then try to improve it. Stretch number 4, hamstring stretches. So for any hamstring stretches, I still see people just rounding their back and just trying really to reach that floor. So with any hamstring stretch, you want to make sure that you're trying to reach your legs with your stomach. So even if you just do this, you can already feel the stretch. And then you can just put your elbows, for example, on a chair, and you can stay in that stretch for 30 seconds. Another common mistake that I see with hamstring stretches is that people do a lot of bouncing movement, a seated hamstring stretch, or whether they're doing a standing hamstring stretch. This is something called ballistic stretching, because you can take your muscle at the very end range of motion and your muscle might not be ready for this, so you can really injure yourself. So the most important thing with the hamstring, making sure that it is always that you're trying to go with your stomach towards the leg. And if you're doing a seated hamstring stretch, make sure that your foot is looking straight, it's not collapsed inward or outward. And again, you can always take a strap to help you, and you can bring yourself closer in a slow motion rather than doing ballistic moves. And stretch number 5, neck stretches. Mistake I see a lot of people with neck stretches, they're just doing really fast neck circles. First of all, it can make your head spin. Second of all, it can really injure yourself. Neck circles are great, but you want to make sure that you are doing them in the really slow and controlled motion, really going through the whole circle and feeling all different muscles of your neck stretching. Most common mistake that I see people who are doing neck stretches is that they are not really sitting straight with their posture. Their shoulders are rounded forward, their posture is not straight, and if you stretch like this, you're not gonna feel such a deep stretch in your neck. So make sure before any neck stretch, whether you are seated or standing, first you bring your shoulders back, you make sure that your posture is nice and straight, and you make sure that your spine is neutral, your core is activated, and then you stretch your neck or you do neck circles or any other neck strengthening exercises. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up.